Now, I want to go through just a couple of examples and then wrap up, because I want to have plenty of time for our speakers today. Orphan diseases is something we've already talked about. And I've mentioned in passing, but now I want to talk about this directly, that there are some tremendously attractive economic aspects of orphan diseases, one of which is that orphan diseases are very likely to be uncorrelated across different kinds of diseases, because by definition, most of these orphan diseases are random mutations. And if they are random, then by definition, the ability to develop a therapy or not is going to be unrelated to other therapies. Now, that's not completely true. I'm going to give counterexamples to that argument in just a few minutes. But the basic idea is that the underlying science tells you that if you're treating Duchenne muscular dystrophy versus leukemia for children, whether you succeed or fail in one should not have a lot to do with another. That's not true with therapies like angiogenesis inhibitors for cancer. If one angiogenesis inhibitor fails, that should give you pause about the other 2 or 3 angiogenesis inhibitors in your portfolio. So clearly there are correlations among different therapeutic areas. The fact that we don't have correlation means that we have a beautiful situation from a portfolio theory perspective. Every project you include in an uncorrelated portfolio of assets will reduce the risk and ultimately increase the Sharpe ratio without bound. Without bound. Let me repeat that. If you have uncorrelated assets, you can keep throwing in projects as long as they have positive expected return. And even if they have slightly negative expected return, you might still want them for their diversification properties, because if it's uncorrelated, you can drive the volatility to 0 and have an infinite Sharpe ratio in the limit. So these are very attractive assets. So in some research, we actually simulated orphan disease portfolios. And what we found is that they're actually incredibly attractive, purely from an investment perspective, never mind the patient perspective. And in order for us to make the case in a more direct and compelling way, we actually got data from a real live orphan disease portfolio, namely the portfolio that was developed at the time by the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, or NCATS, as it's fondly known. NCATS is part of the NIH focused on rare diseases. And they actually had 28 projects that were targeted at rare disease indications. They gave us the data, and from that data we ran simulations of what a mega fund of orphan disease projects would look like. And what we found in that simulation is a modified IRR of about 21%. 21% for a relatively small portfolio of about $400 or $500 million, 15 or 20 projects. And this shocked us. We didn't expect that. I mean, this is interesting irrespective of the fact that it's going to do lots of people lots of good. So interestingly, when we wrote the paper and submitted it, the referees, who were not financial experts, were very skeptical. And their view was, look, these numbers, where are you getting them from? They're just sort of, out of thin air. We want to see some kind of hard evidence. And we actually went to the trouble of getting venture capitalists to look at the portfolio that NCATS had developed. These are live projects that NCATS had. And we asked these venture capitalists to value them, give a ballpark figure of what you would pay for a project if it were for sale right now, today. And we got numbers from 3 or 4 venture capitalists, and we averaged them. And that's what we did the valuation. And the referee said, I don't understand that. That doesn't sound very scientific to me. And our response was, you're absolutely right. It's not scientific. But that's how business works. We went to the venture capitalists because they are the ones that are going to be paying for these projects eventually. NCATS is actually taking the projects from preclinical to the point where VCs can take over. But something happened during that time that ultimately convinced the referees. What happened is, while our paper was under review, 2 of the projects in the NCATS portfolio were purchased by pharma. And the 2 projects that were purchased were this project by SREX that was purchased by Baxter, and then another project that was purchased by Shire. Now, we don't know what the purchase price was for. We don't know what the milestones and other terms are. It's too complicated. But what we did was to measure the stock price reaction on the day that Shire and Baxter announced their acquisitions of these two projects from NCATS. And on the day of announcement, the stock prices went up by a combined total of about $650 million. By the way, the NCATS budget for creating the projects was about 25 million. So the proposition looks extremely attractive.